Good afternoon. Today I am joined by former mayors Mark Mallory, Charlie Lucan, John Cranley, Roxanne Qualls, and David Mann. There he is. As well as CSR Board of Trustees, Norfolk Southern representatives, and several council members, Councilmember Jeffries, Councilmember Cramerding, Councilmember Harris, President Pro Tem Parks, Vice Mayor Kearney. This is a truly special moment for our city, and the presence of so many former mayors with us today is a testament to the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that today's decision poses. We are thrilled to announce that this afternoon, the Cincinnati Southern Railroad Board of Trustees will vote on a proposed sale of the railroad to the Norfolk Southern Railway Company for over $1.6 billion. Back in the late 1800s, Cincinnati leaders made a major decision, one we still feel the benefits of to this day. They built the Cincinnati Southern Railway, stretching from here to Chattanooga, which remains the nation's only municipally owned interstate railroad. Since 1881, the railway has been leased to the Cincinnati, New Orleans, and Texas Pacific Railway, a subsidiary of Norfolk Southern, to serve local industries as well as their larger rail corridor. Because of this lease, and because of the decision our forefathers made to invest in Cincinnati's future, we currently receive about $25 million a year for infrastructure. These funds have helped play a pivotal role in our ability to maintain the critical infrastructure that our residents rely on, and to support our financial health as a city, all from a vision started 150 years ago. It's our responsibility to live up to that legacy and to make the strategic decisions that will leave our descendants the strongest Cincinnati possible, and that's exactly what we're doing today. With the proposed sale, the $1.6 billion purchase price will be used for the creation of the Building Our Future Trust Fund, an infrastructure trust fund to be managed and invested by the Cincinnati Southern Railway Board of Trustees. This couldn't be coming at a more important time for our city. In just the next 5 years, we are facing over $385 million in unfunded capital needs. This proposal, brought by a bipartisan Board of Trustees, represents an historic opportunity to deliver great value to our residents while realizing a substantial return on the investment and foresight of our predecessors. Upon voter approval and necessary state law changes, the city will achieve two incredibly important goals through this sale. First, we will continue to receive no less in revenue than we do under the current lease each year, with revenue projected to double. And second, we are securing a robust and sustainable community asset, one that supports us not only in the short term, but in perpetuity, allowing us to provide for the transportation and infrastructure needs of our residents for generations to come, at a time when we have an extreme need to get back on track with our deferred capital maintenance. Right now, we have tremendous and growing infrastructure needs, and these dollars are a crucial step towards closing that gap. The Building Our Future Trust Fund will empower us to dramatically increase our commitment to vital existing infrastructure, maintaining the roads and bridges our residents use every day to get to and from work, improving our public facilities, which let us deliver core basic services like police, fire, and trash removal, and investing in our parks and recreation areas so that every resident has access to public spaces that they can be proud of and that their children and grandchildren can be proud of. I want to thank the Cincinnati Southern Railway Board of Trustees and the team Norfolk and Southern put together for coming to the table and achieving an agreement that brings historic value to all parties. Thanks to their work, we are helping ensure that a century from now, our city has the strongest foundation possible. I'm so proud to join Cincinnati's current and past leaders in celebrating this seminal moment for our city, and I look forward to submitting this deal to the voters for their approval. Up next is the CSR Board of Trustees President, Paul Meething.
He's a little taller than I am. Mary, thank you for that introduction. On behalf of the board of the Cincinnati Southern Railway, I want to thank you for your principled leadership and for your vision for how this unique asset, the only municipally owned, railroad in America, can benefit the Cincinnati citizens for generations to come. As the mayor said, more than a century and a half ago, Ohio Senator Edward Ferguson put forth what was then called a remarkable proposition: a city-owned railroad from Cincinnati to Chattanooga. Initially, the vision was to facilitate commerce to and from Cincinnati and to support the city's economic development and growth. In recent decades, this 337-mile stretch of railway has benefited the preservation and development of the city's infrastructure: roads, bridges, buildings, parks, and more. It was and remains a remarkable proposition. Today's announcement will perpetuate Senator Ferguson's vision. It will perpetuate the vision of the Smale Commission from 30 years ago and the leadership and stewardship of generations of Cincinnatians who have faithfully and responsibly served as members of the Board of Trustees of the railroad. More importantly, though, it will perpetuate remarkable support for the rehabilitation, modernization, or replacement of Cincinnati's existing infrastructure. The creation of the Infrastructure Trust Fund, which the mayor talked about, from the proceeds of the sale, will generate historic levels of revenue, much more than it generates today, to address these pressing infrastructure needs. Yes, the Cincinnati Railway is and remains a remarkable proposition. I want to thank my colleagues, my current colleagues on the board of the Cincinnati Southern Railway, as well as all past board members, for your dedication to the railway and to the citizens of Cincinnati. Please acknowledge my current colleagues: Paul Sylvester, Mayor Lucan, Mayor Mallory, former councilperson Amy Murray. I also want to just take a second and acknowledge Tom Kilcoyne, who was my predecessor as president of the board and who steered the railway board for decades and did such a great job. Thank you, Tom. So, two former mayors and a former member of city council, even more evidence that the long-term needs of the citizens of Cincinnati were at the table for every minute of our years-long negotiation with Norfolk and Southern. I also want to thank our colleagues with Norfolk and Southern. You were smart, fair, and tough negotiators. I hope you agree that we each served our constituents well with this historic deal. It has been a pleasure doing business with you. We still have some work to do to convince the voters of Cincinnati that it is indeed another remarkable proposition for the citizens of Cincinnati. As members of the Cincinnati Board of Trustees, we look forward to working with everyone here today to help make that happen. Again, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Paul. Councilmember Scotty Johnson has joined us. Welcome, sir. And I failed to mention our leader of City Hall, Cheryl Long, our city administrator. Our next speaker is Mike McClellan, SVP, Chief Strategy Officer for Norfolk Southern.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here in this beautiful building. President Muthing, Mayor Aftab, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and all the leaders of the city of Cincinnati. So, on behalf of the Norfolk Southern representatives in this room, and all the men and women of Norfolk Southern, we're honored to be here today for this really historic announcement, and we're proud to be part of it. On a personal note, I'm very excited to be here because I consider myself to be a fellow Cincinnatian. I lived in this great town for 4 wonderful years. I did my graduate work at the University of Cincinnati, the Bearcats. 31 years ago, I proposed to my wife at the top of the stairs at Immaculata. Apparently, I was not the first one to do that. And 31 years ago, she said yes. And we're still together today. So I have a really deep place in my heart for this. So, you know, when I think about this transaction, I think about the word certainty. And for the citizens of Cincinnati, I think about certainty in terms of getting value from this asset for generations to come, no longer bound by one industry or even one company. And that's a big deal. For Norfolk Southern, I think about certainty in a few ways. First of all, certainty that this critical artery in our nation's supply chain will continue to be there and invested in by Norfolk Southern and available to all shippers in North America. You know, we move 30 trains a day over that line. We carry building materials, steel, grain, feed, and yes, even Christmas presents are moving on that line. And we employ hundreds of people on that line as well. And we do so in such a way that's very little burden on the taxpayers. We pay for everything. You don't need to, unlike the highways, where you have the maintenance and building of the highways. Number two, I think about certainty in terms of pursuing or continuing to pursue our sustainability strategy. The shippers on Norfolk Southern avoid 15 million tons of carbon emissions by using Norfolk Southern in lieu of trucks. Third, I think about certainty for the employees. We maintain, build, operate, and manage the CNO and TP, and we have hundreds of employees that do this. This is going to be certainty for those employees, especially the employees here in Cincinnati, and certainty around the really high-paying jobs that we provide to the citizens of this great city. And finally, we think about certainty to the shipping public. You know, this serves many local businesses, and we're proud partners with the businesses in Cincinnati and plan on strengthening those business relationships we have to make Cincinnati businesses more competitive. But it also serves the shippers really throughout North America. You would be surprised at the to and from where everything is going over this line. So thank you to everyone here up here today. It's an honor to be here, and we're really proud to be here as part of this historic announcement. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll take some questions.
Mayor, why sell the railroad? Why not drive a bargain on the lease and get more money back?
Look, all parties involved on the city side want to make sure that we get the best possible deal for the city of Cincinnati. We've vetted this deal. We've taken a look at what the fair value is for the railroad. We've taken a look at the increasing needs that the city has with respect to infrastructure. As I mentioned, over $300 million in deferred capital maintenance over the next 5 years, which will only continue to grow. And it gets back to the reason the founders built the railroad in the first place. And that is to make sure that we have assets available for the basic services that the city relies on. We're talking about bridges and roads, police and fire and sanitation workers. And instead of relying on one business or one industry, an industry that we're seeing disrupted constantly from advancements in technology, Cincinnatians can now rest assured that through this trust fund, our most pressing infrastructure needs will be funded in perpetuity. It's important to know that right now, based on the lease, we get $25 million a year. Based on investment returns, we're projecting that will increase year over year to $50 to $60 million without, importantly, without touching the principal. That strategy is not just a good deal for Cincinnati, it is a historic investment into the future generations of our city, which will ensure its stability and growth long past when everyone up here will be gone. Paul?
You know, I don't want to speak for Norfolk and Southern, but when we started the lease renegotiation process, we had every intention of entering into a new lease with Norfolk and Southern. During that process, Norfolk and Southern came to us and said, you know, on a new lease, we'd be willing to pay this. on a sale, if we have control of this, if we own it, there are reasons that it's more important for them to have it in their hands. And what we found was that when we weighed one transaction against the other, we came to the conclusion that a sale at this price was the better deal for the city of Cincinnati.
What lease price did they offer, can you say?
It was, you know, there was a series of bids and asks over time, and I think it's just fair to say that we never got, they never offered a number that was as high as we think the investment returns will be from the purchase price we're talking about.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Musil, as you might know, there is legal action to possibly put a stop to this that took place this morning. And some of the critics are saying this was done too much in private, that they don't know enough about it, that this should have been done in public. What's your answer to that? And then there's a follow-up for the gentleman from Mr. Norfolk, from Norfolk Southern. How does Norfolk Southern intend to pay for this from a business perspective? Are you going to borrow the money or whatever? So
I'll let Emily Smart-Warner, our city solicitor, talk about the legal action that's currently pending. But any suggestion that this was not done out in the open or is being rushed is just counter to the facts. The board is a public board that meets regularly. The meetings are posted. The notifications for the board meetings are all posted publicly. Executive session is a state law tool that allows for the board to talk privately. It was used in this instance because exactly for why it was designed at the state level, which was to negotiate the details of this deal. Had the railroad board negotiated outside of executive session, that would have been bad for Cincinnati taxpayers because we would have been, in essence, been negotiating against ourselves. You know, the other thing to keep in mind, and part of the reason why the timing is happening now, is because it was important for everyone up here to make sure that the public had as much time as is necessary to vet this deal in advance of the ballot initiative that is required for it to go through. The ballot initiative will likely come in the next general election, which is a year from now. So the public has an entire year to better understand the deal, to vet the deal, to ask their questions, and ultimately to pass or fail the deal. That's up to the people of Cincinnati. I'll let Emily Smart-Warner talk about the pending legal action.
Good afternoon. I don't have too much to add to what the mayor explained. The CSR board is excited to have its meeting today to discuss in public its proposed sale. The action that was filed in Judge Marsh's courtroom was seeking to restrain the board from entering into executive session outside of Ohio law. The board didn't intend to enter into executive session today, and so Judge Marsh denied the temporary restraining order just a few minutes ago.
I prepare to be unsatisfied with this answer. Norfolk Southern will be releasing additional information after the close of the market today on some of the questions that you're asking.
Sure.
So, Mayor, you said that this is an open process. Things were done as they were meant to be done, negotiating in executive sessions, but then we just hear Attorney Newthing say the deal was fair. This is the time to say what the offers were, what the terms were. The public, they deserve to know this. You negotiated, it's done, almost. Can you please tell us the details of this?
Well, again, I think you can only imagine a negotiation that spanned 2 years, the back and forth that went on. I can say confidently that where we are today is not where we started. And so along the way, there were various steps. They went up, we went down, and where we are today is we think a fair price.
Can you explain more about how the lockbox, if that's the right term, works?
It is not the right term.
Okay.
It is a trust fund.
Okay.
Chris?
All right. Fair enough. How does it work?
I'll let Paul discuss the details.
Yeah, what the proposed state law changes require is that this money will continue to be held by the board of the CSR Railway. The proposed changes allow the board to invest that money for the benefit of the city of Cincinnati and to make a annual payment to the city from those proceeds. Okay, the existing state law, which has been in existence since 1880 and changed several times since then, would have required that the proceeds be used differently and would not have allowed the CSR board to continue to hold those funds and invest them as has been outlined. So that's what the trust fund is all about.
How does it?
If I can
I'm
add.
sorry.
So in addition to getting voter approval, you have to get General Assembly approval.
Yes, so there's two steps, state law change and then voter approval in the next general election. Just more on the trust fund. As it stands now, we get $25 million that from the lease that's directly paid from Norfolk Southern to the city. The change in state law and the ballot language will provide for a floor that the city will get every year based on the investment returns. That floor will likely be around 25 million, essentially status quo. If the returns are particularly good, the board has discretion above 25 million to hold back some of those returns and not give the full amount to the city in order to make sure that the principal is untouched, in order to have a contingency in the years where returns may not be as robust.
Mayor, you have to sell this to the voters and ultimately, and so one of the key things will be, I guess, assurances that it will just go for infrastructure needs and not for other things, because in the release here, you've got bridges, parks, recreation, other infrastructure necessary for delivery for public services.
Yeah.
Are we looking at an expanded definition of what infrastructure is?
No, we are looking at existing infrastructure to replace, repair, or modernize. It's very important for the taxpayers of Cincinnati to understand that this trust fund will be laser focused on our existing infrastructure, which is critical given the deferred capital maintenance shadow and dark cloud that we're living under. The language at the state level is drafted very clearly for that purpose. And so future councils and future mayors' hands will be tied if they want to go outside of the four corners of that agreement.
And the investment is.
One second, Chris.
Sure.
Go ahead, Sherry.
Was this put out to bid? Norfolk Southern is willing to pay $1.6 billion and negotiated in good faith. Was any other railroad, anyone else interested in the right of way here, like Elon Bus or Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So, Norfolk Southern has a lease on the railroad that runs through the end of 2026. At the beginning of 2021, they had the option to exercise a new 25-year renewal term on the lease, okay? So what started in the beginning of 2021 was a negotiation about what the lease payment was going to be under the new lease. Norfolk and Southern, because of that option, controls the railroad, or would have controlled the railroad for the next 25 years. So we weren't in a position to go to any of the people that you mentioned, unless they would have bought the railroad subject to Norfolk and Southern's right to operate it for the next 25 years. Okay, so this wasn't a situation where we could have just gone out and sought other bids to buy the railroad.
Chris?
Yeah.
Then you, Becca.
Go ahead, Becca, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So state law allows executive session to discuss the sale of property that has been put out to bid. So then how is it legal for the board to have gone into several executive sessions over the summer if this project was not put out to bid, it was only negotiated with one purchaser?
No.
I think the important thing to understand is the complexity of the existing lease terms and what that means if this particular proposed sale doesn't fall through, or if it falls through, then that leaves the board with a complicated and somewhat convoluted steps for going through a lease renegotiation arbitration, which involves if things don't go according to plan, at the end, the possibility of competitively bidding the railroad. So we're not at that point yet, but it's still an open possibility, and that's why it is legal under Ohio law.
Chris?
I was wondering if someone can talk about how the investments will be made. All of us with 401ks are aware of how much we've lost this year.
Yeah.
How will you do this in a way that is safe for the taxpayers?
I'll let Paul talk about the specifics, but the $50 to $60 million return is a conservative estimate based on a 5% return. And so we are optimistic based on those conservative projections that it will exceed that number.
Yeah, I mean, the specific is that the board of the railroad would intend to do an RFP to hire several money managers who would be charged with coming up with investment strategies to invest this money. You know, we on the board, or whoever follows us on the board, don't claim to be qualified to invest these kind of dollars. So we're going to hire people that are qualified to do it. As the mayor said, if you multiply 3% times 1.6 billion, you get about 50. So 50 million. We're talking about what we've been advised is we can expect to receive 5.5% or more. So that would allow the board to retain some of the investment dollars for future days, but still give the city, more than twice what they're currently getting.
So you
Is
wouldn't
it possible
necessarily
the
give all of the
principal
returns, if you have let's say a really good year.
No.
You would not all of a sudden just turn that over to the city.
No.
You'd save some back and put it back into the trust.
Yes.
Did you get more than three? Did you get more than three appraisals? More than one appraisal for the railroad?
I would say we had more than one consultant give us an indication of what they thought the railroad was worth.
Can you say what those numbers are?
I would tell you this, each of the consultants we worked with had, one had 3, the other had 4 different methodologies for valuing the asset. And therefore, because there were different methodologies, the range of values was, was pretty dramatic. I would say that we were satisfied that the 1.6 billion was beyond the midpoint of each of the valuation methodologies.
John?
Mayor, so, I envision a possibility in the era that we are in, the suspicion and the atmosphere that we are in, that we're going to probably need a campaign oh, maybe not, I don't know, but, have you thought about this and how you might come back, because it involves so much money.
Yeah.
That there might be, I don't know if you call it an opportunity, but people who want to tap it and raise suspicion about what's being done.
Yeah, look, no decision that we make in City Hall is 100% approval. And so there's no doubt that there will be people who have questions. There might be people who are opposed. It's our job to clearly articulate why this is good for Cincinnati, and I believe it is. And it's more than just me. I'm not sure it's ever happened where this many former mayors have come together in 100% support for an issue. Certainly, they can tell you a long list of reasons why they disagree on any number of things. But it's really special to me to have so many former mayors here, because mayors occupy a unique seat in our city government. They're oftentimes the one person who's not looking at next 2 years or 4 years or re-election, but looking at the next 10 generations of Cincinnatians. And to a person, every single one of them were strongly supporting this as a good deal, not just now, but in perpetuity. And that's probably a good segue to invite the former mayors up to make some comments. I will invite them up in order of when they were last in office, so as not to show any favoritism. So starting us off is former Mayor John Cranley.
Thank you. This is truly historic. First, thank you, Mayor Purval, for your leadership. I appointed Mayor Lucan and Mallory and Councilmember Murray and Paul Sylvester for longevity, and Paul Muthing, lifelong Republican, to 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, because I knew if this day ever came, credibility would be important. And I happily stand shoulder to shoulder with them. This is an annuity that our ancestors gave us, and we need to give to our children's children and great-grandchildren, etc. The sole purpose of it is to maximize annual amounts so that every generation and every year the city's infrastructure can be properly maintained. And the fact is that the Smale Commission, 35 years ago, that Mayor Lucan created, did a lot of good, but cost of roads, bridges, and potholes have exceeded those projections. The fact is that our roads and bridges and potholes, which are, as the mayor pointed out, deeply in deferred maintenance, there are just a couple of options. One is continued decline of our city's infrastructure, or a tax increase, or this. There's a year to have conversations and to make sure that everybody knows what they're voting on a year from now. We understand this is new information to many people. And that's why it's good that we have a year to have this conversation. But the biggest unmet need of the city's budget, and I know the budget extremely well, is that given the cost of inflation, we do not have enough capital money. So it comes down to a simple choice for the voters. Do you want a tax increase? If you don't want a tax increase, do you want infrastructure that continues to collapse? Or do we take advantage of this with the Lockbox Trust Fund to ensure that it is spent solely for roads, bridges, potholes, existing infrastructure, and to ensure that it is an everlasting, evergreen annuity and cannot be spent by any given council at the expense of future generations. I'm glad and proud to stand with all my former colleagues and current leaders to support this initiative. Thank you.
Not for you, for the mayor. So, former Mayor Cranley did say that you want a tax increase or you want to fix all this. So are you promising here there will be no tax increases?
I'm not. We
So
have.
it's not.
We have announced a commission led by John Miller, P&G CEO, to take a look at our budgets on our economic development and robust community survey to get a sense of not only the deferred capital maintenance that is significant, but also the fact that in 2 years we're facing $50 million deficits. So a full picture of the finances of the city are necessary. Now, I will say that $1.6 billion going into our existing infrastructure forever is a very strong step in the right direction as it relates to our fiscal health. But there are increasing challenges looming on the horizon. Our next mayor is former Mayor Mark Mount.
First of all, let me thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership and your ability to bring together a diverse group of former mayors who differ on many, many issues over many decades. This is truly an historic moment. It is not lost on me that we are here in the Cincinnati Union Terminal. This building, built by 7 railroads in the late 1920s, opened in 1931, was a fantastic train station, as train stations go. It is the largest half-dome, freestanding half-dome in North America. In the late 1960s and early 70s, when passenger rail declined, and the railroads wanted to abandon this building, it was Charlie Lucan's father, Mayor Tom Lucan, who worked with the railroads and figured out a way to save this building and its contents. The exchange was for $1. So here we are today, making a decision about railroads and how those railroads fit into the fabric of Cincinnati. Legacy is what I think about. I think a lot about legacy, considering the fact that my father worked in the next room there when it was a cafeteria. He was memorialized here when he passed away. I was sworn in here. I've held many press conferences in this room. When I think about legacy, I think about Edward Ferguson and what Edward Ferguson figured out when the Ohio Constitution was changed and said that cities could not enter into joint enterprises. And Edward Ferguson figured out, well, forget the joint enterprise, we'll just do it ourselves. He was the one that figured out, well, we can just do the railroad ourselves. We will build the railroad. That's how we ended up here today, because of Ed Ferguson's vision. He sold that vision to the citizens of Cincinnati. They raised the necessary funds and they built the railroad. So now when we talk about whether or not to sell the railroad, we have to think about Edward Ferguson. We have to think about what he would want us to consider. The railroad trustees have that in mind. The railroad may change form. The asset that Edward Ferguson set up may change forms. It may go from being land and tracks and gravel to being a trust fund. A trust fund that will exist in perpetuity for the benefit of Cincinnatians, and will pay at a level at which a lease would probably never pay. That's the decision that the trustees had to consider, and that is the decision that voters of the city of Cincinnati will have to consider as this deal moves forward. Mr. Mayor, once again, thank you for your leadership, and I want to thank all of the former mayors who are here, all of the officials from Norfolk Southern who helped work this deal out, and the members of Cincinnati City Council. Thank you.
Our next former mayor is Mayor Charlie Lucan.
Mayor, thank you for your leadership and your support, which is critical to this process. As I said to the other day, there's nobody better to tell the people of Cincinnati what is in their best interests than a very popular mayor of our city, and so it's nice to have you with us on this. To my board members, you know, I've enjoyed this board. I mean, this board's been a lot of fun, and Paul's given the tough questions about the negotiation. You know, this board sat through a lot of very tempting offers and said, no, we don't have to go into greater detail than that, but there were a lot of them, and we said no. And the only thing that I would start by telling the voters of Cincinnati is this. This railroad, for the last several decades, has done one thing. It has provided money for the infrastructure of Cincinnati. And going forward, the legacy of this railroad is going to be one thing: providing money for the infrastructure of Cincinnati. The only difference for me as a taxpayer, and whoever else is out there as a taxpayer of the city, only difference is there's going to be a lot more money to deal with these problems, and that's it. You know, having a year to tell this story to the public, Cincinnati voters, I've found over the years, win or lose, are pretty smart folks, and I think they'll get it. I think we'll win. And again, Mayor, thank you.
Our next former mayor is Roxanne Coles.
Thank you. I am very pleased to be here with Mayor Aftab, as many people are now affectionately calling him, and also my former mayoral colleagues, the members of City Council, the representatives of Norfolk Southern, as well as the Railroad Board. You've already heard a lot about why this is a good thing. From my perspective, I'm not going to repeat that, but what I am going to say is that one of the greatest obligations we have as elected officials, when we're elected officials, is to really think about the future. And while it is very easy and tempting sometimes to think in the short run, we are obligated as mayors to think about generations to come and how we actually ensure the best interests of the city of Cincinnati, not individual neighborhoods, not individual sectors. We are obligated to think of the future. And when we look at the opportunity that this deal with Norfolk Southern provides to the city to actually keep a promise to the citizens that yes, we will actually maintain the house of the city, that we will invest in it, that we will do roads, we will do bridges, we will do police and fire and recreation centers and parks, all of the things which ensure that every single citizen has access to an equal quality of life throughout the city of Cincinnati. This deal becomes incredibly important. The idea that we would, from a $1.6 billion deal, be able to conservatively double the amount of money that on an annual basis the city of Cincinnati can invest in the fundamentals is something that I don't think anybody ever really dreamed would be possible, but now it is. And as you've already heard before, it is up to us, in concert with each other, to talk to the citizens of Cincinnati and talk about these deals and help them understand it. The other thing that is also, I think, incredibly important is to make sure that people do know, and I know the mayor said that this is a trust and not a lockbox. However, I think one of the reasons why people can stand shoulder to shoulder is because that trust is a lockbox, and it will not be spent haphazardly, it will not be siphoned off, it will not be diverted, and that is the job that the Railroad Board will perform on behalf of all the citizens of Cincinnati to ensure that this legacy continues down through the generations. Thank you.
And our final mayor, former Mayor David Mann. Welcome.
I told my wife this morning I was living the dream. I didn't realize I was going to get to speak after 5 other mayors. So, in 1981, now last year after I've talked a lot about my being around a long time, in 1981, former Mayor Barry was chair of the Board of Southern Railway Trustees, and the lease requires that the trustees and someone from the city take an annual trip on the right-of-way. Now this is 300 miles of gorgeous right-of-way from Cincinnati to Chattanooga, and my attitude was, as a first-time mayor, I don't want to miss any experience. Plus Ted Berry, as a new chair of the trustees, was determined to, guess what, negotiate a better deal with the Southern Railway. And the Southern Railway started out that morning trip with breakfast in a beautiful 19th century wood paneled car, I guess director's car. And we had breakfast, and Bert Combs, former governor of Kentucky, former Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals judge, just happened to be present with some thoughts on what a fair renegotiation of the lease would consist of. Then we took the 300-mile trip talking about what was fair in the lease. At some point, I asked somebody, I said, you know, it wouldn't be bad to get up in at the front of the train, and he said, no, that's not allowed. And I said to the chair of the Southern Railway Board, it's too bad that I can't get up there. And he said, oh, Mayor, we can get you up there. So I spent the last 100 miles in a non-air conditioned cabin, pulling a horn at every opportunity. So that's one thing that's being lost, I suppose. But $1.6 billion is a lot of money, and I can't imagine any way that the lease provisions ever would provide the annual revenue that's going to come from the investment of $1.6 billion. And I am very secure with the safety of putting $1.6 billion in a fund that we can't touch. We can only use, we being the taxpayers and the government of the city of Cincinnati, can only use the revenues that are produced each year. So I think we're going to find all of us, as we examine this deal in the next year, that this is a wonderful moment for the finance of the city, and it's a wonderful tribute to the leadership of Mayor Pureval. So let's go after it. Thank you.
Thank you to the former members. Any former mayors? Any other final questions?
What
Yes.
happens if voters say no? What happens to the lease at that point?
Yeah, I'll let Paul talk about that.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, the current lease runs through 2026. We will have to get back to the table with Norfolk and Southern and try to negotiate a new lease rate for the next 25 years. And if that's not possible, there's a arbitration provision process that's provided for in the lease. It's frankly tortured, but if we have to go through that, that's what we'll have to do. So the lease will continue under those circumstances through, I think, 2051.
Final question.
Is the legislature, the state legislature process, that part of that, is that pro forma? Is that already in the works, or is there?
No, look, it's up to the General Assembly to change state law. So that's in addition to passing the ballot initiative, that's also a critical step. We're going to do everything we can to talk to our members about why this is such a good deal, and that's why Bill Seitz, who's a strong leader up in Columbus, is already publicly supportive. Chris, for the final question.
I'll make it a two-part. Do you expect a vote in the lame duck session of the legislature? And then as far as city council's role, they still decide the infrastructure needs of the city, right? In terms of this money?
That's right. As far as lame duck, it's up to the General Assembly. The process for spending infrastructure dollars will remain unchanged. The administration and the mayor proposes a budget, and the council has the ultimate power over our budget, including our infrastructure dollars. Council cannot dictate how much money is coming from the CSR board every year based on the investment returns, but based on the money that comes to the city from the trust fund, the council then is the ultimate decider about where that money goes. There's a CSR board meeting in this room at 1 p.m., entirely open to the public. We encourage you to stick around. Thank you so much.
Hey, Jimmy.
So thus ends the mayor's press conference about the pending sale of the Cincinnati Southern Railway for $1.6 billion. Voters will have to approve in an upcoming general election. Norfolk Southern gathered here. You can see we're in the beautiful Cincinnati dining room, Cincinnati Union Terminal. And this is major railroad news in the city of Cincinnati and nationwide.